Hello, I'm Doris Dantes, and I'm here today with Melba Patillo Beals, who is an honoree that was inducted into the 2002 Marin Women's Hall of Fame in the area of community service and social change. Welcome, Melba, and congratulations.
Thank you, thank you. I'm very proud of having the people in my own arena give me this kind of award, and I'm really thrilled with it.
Well, I know you've been recognized nationally for a lot of your work, but as you say, it must be nice
This
to
is
be.
home.
Yes.
I hold more than 100 national awards, plus the Congressional Gold Medal, which is a special honor from Congress. Congress never agrees on anything, but they voted this one medal. But in the end, what you want most, I think, is the respect and accord of the people that you live with every day.
Of course,
So.
yes. Well, I know you have a long history of community activism and working for social change, actually dating back to your childhood. Tell us a little bit about that.
I grew up in Little Rock, Arkansas, which is and was at the time during the 1950s and early 60s kind of the center of, I suppose today, the firestorm of civil rights. And by virtue of an accident of fate, I was making good grades at the time. My mother is and was an English professor, and so she had certain guidelines that we had to follow. So many books to read a summer, so many sentences to correct, and use the correct English. And so that sort of put us into the mode, my brother and I. And so I was selected as one of the Little Rock Nine, and these were 9 people who were slated to integrate Central High School in 1957. But Governor Faubus, who was the governor at that time, did not agree with that plan, although early on the Supreme Court had dictated that schools had to be integrated. And so the governor's disagreement with it, and many of the people who lived in the South at the time, their wanting to stick to tradition, led us to what you would call, I suppose, a head-on war, in the sense that you had mobs, armed mobs, rampaging the city. And so that was the beginning, let us say, of my foray into the public eye, into civil rights, unknowingly so.
Yes.
It wasn't anything I planned, it just happened.
And given that history in your early years, were there certain obstacles that you had to overcome in order to move on in your life?
I think perhaps the biggest obstacle was getting past the horror of what I had endured by understanding that I could move on, that I didn't have to be frightened. One of the really interesting gifts to me was that after this incident, in which it was basically white pitted against black, and although in the middle of this whole thing, white Americans came to our rescue, I certainly wouldn't be sitting here without the white National Guard, the white 101st Airborne Division soldiers who guarded me, and then members of the clergy, priest, and also a lot of rabbis marched with us, walked with us into school. So we made it through that year by virtue of many different people and the grace of God. I had to get to the normalcy of life. My big challenge here was to understand that I was not always a warrior. I would later write a book called Warriors Don't Cry, because in order to survive that incident, I had to become a warrior. I had to be trained how to survive day-to-day combat. I had to be trained how to get injured. As a child, you have no idea that you could be so badly injured both by spirit, but physically, and survive. You don't know that. And so I realized by the soldiers that guarded me, by Martin Luther King coming in, by the Quakers that came in. A lot of Quakers came in from the East to help us, and they would say, you don't have to fight back, and you can be injured and survive. So I learned that I could get acid in my eyes, I could be hit in the back, I could be tripped, and I could live on. And that was the big obstacle I had to become, was seeing this connection between me and a God that protected me no matter what.
And so those survival skills must have served you well as you've gone on in your life in pursuit of other things.
The excursion into Central High School made me very frightened. And you're isolated. There were 1,900 white children, aged probably, 12 or 13 up to 18.
Yes.
And 9 of us. in an 8-block square school. So it's like being in this huge castle, and there's no way that we did, you don't have anybody that you can really count on. And so what you have to learn is to count on yourself.
Yes.
And thereby count on a God.
Yes.
And so that would then carry me into adulthood because it put a core of steel in my spine.
Yes.
It means call me whatever you'd like. My grandmother used to say, sticks and stones, have them call you rich, darling. See if the coins jingle out of your pocket.
Right.
And then she would also say to me, which was very helpful, which was, if you hold on to bitterness, it's like chewing on lemon juice. You have to replace that with honey. You can't hate and survive. So what I learned to overcome, of course, was any animosity. And then, how God has a sense of humor. When I came to California, escaping the Klan, because the year after that, 58, then the governor of Arkansas closed all the schools. He said, we're not going to have any more integration here, we're going to close the schools. So he then, riled up the people who didn't want integration. And so there was, this whole bill being passed around by the Klan saying 10,000 dead or 5,000 alive. So I had to leave that area. We all did, all 9 of us did. By twist of fate, I would get off at the San Francisco airport and expecting there to be a host of black people to meet me. Because it said you'll be met by the Santa Rosa NAACP. Well, it was like 16 or 18 white folks. And, I get off this plane and I'm escaping the Klan and all these white people come rushing towards me with their arms extended. And I'm looking and I'm thinking, who's standing behind me? Because I'm not believing that this, and they were there to welcome me. And I was supposed to, I thought, go and stay with this wonderful black family. I had imagined that the thing I would get would be a telephone. That's what I wanted. Because by then I was, 16?
Oh, yes.
Going on 17. So, but instead, I would end up, through a series of flukes, the people who were originally going to take me were also white, but their neighbors didn't want me there. And I would end up going to a family called the McCabe's, Dr. and Mrs. George McCabe. And he was a psychologist that at that time at San Francisco State University.
Yes.
And she was a activist, a Quaker activist. And it just frightened me to death the first night I went there, But this would be a big gift. This would help me overcome any fences or any animosity I had, because those people to this day are my parents, and I'm almost 60 years of age. My daddy helped to found what is here Sonoma State University. He was drawing pictures of this university on a piece of paper. My mom, I will see probably in a couple of days. I just saw a couple of days before. She does Ashtanga yoga 3 times a week. She practices Qigong. At 84, she backpacks into the Marble Mountains.
Wow.
And she is leading something called the Russian River Celebration this summer. So these are not folks who sit still and knit.
Right.
Daddy has since passed on. But what I got, to bring back to your question, from them was that I love them. And therefore, there are no these lines of demarcation. Daddy was very tall with reddish blonde hair and blue eyes. He looked to me in the beginning just like some of the men who held the ropes over trees hoping to hang me. And yet he was the kindest man that ever lived and the only father I really ever knew.
Well, obviously they've played a very significant role in your life. Are there other people, you mentioned your mother, you mentioned your grandmother, anyone in particular that served as a real role model that made a significant difference in your life?
I'd have to go back to my grandmother, India, and my mom, because these were really strong ladies. So I would say it would be mother and grandmother, who were role models in that they never let anything stop them. Mother walked 10 miles a day to get her education. Grandmother worked as a maid in White Lady's Kitchen for $1 a day. Through all of the peril that they went through all of the times that people shot into our houses in Little Rock, through all of the no resources. Grandmother could take a chicken on Sunday and she could make that thing last through to the next Saturday, and you would hardly know it. I mean, there'd be these great aromas coming from the kitchen. She'd do chicken and rice, flakes of chicken and whatever, and she never let us feel poor.
Yes.
She never let us feel as though we were without any resources. And she did that through helping us to understand the universality of God's resources. And she always helped us to understand our own equality, and she also put education first. She and grandmother made education the paramount thing in our lives.
That theme of the importance of education seems to have continued with you
Always
in
through
your
my life.
adulthood.
Yes, education, ideas, study, improving yourself. I have to make up a set of goals, every birthday. I keep my goals in mind, and that's all from my mother and my grandmother, Now I'm working on another doctorate.
Yes.
Right, even at 60, I'm working on another doctorate. Well, it's because you wind me up and I go to school. And you have to have renewal. The other thing they taught me was giving back. Not recently now, but when I adopted little identical twin boys.
Yes.
And that was on my list of giving back. Like before that, I was on a lot of boards, and my way of giving back was service through these boards. But then I one day figured out that perhaps I could do more by having an adoption.
And personalized.
And I've been thinking about that and sort of bragging about it for a long time. Sort of not really meaning it. In the black community, we call it woofing.
Yes.
I'm going to catch a bigger fish. I'm going to, And this occasion came up where these little kids are in my life. My sons are now 11, and they're happily trotting along. And I'm a soccer mom, a baseball mom, a swimming mom.
Yes.
I'm packing lunches again every day and doing homework.
So Melba, it was truly a stroke of fortune that you ended up in California living with the McCabe family, who obviously played an important role in your life. Tell us a little bit about that period as you lived with them and then went on to college.
The life was totally different.
Yes.
Before I lived in the city, I was always frightened. I was in this little black enclave, and we were totally, sequestered and controlled. But now I'm in Santa Rosa, California. There are no black people, or few black people there.
Right.
And my daddy owns the world because he is a teacher, and we live in this little farmhouse, and there are all these cattle, and I don't know where I am. It's disorientation. And I go to school, and the school, again, is almost all white. There's like one other black kid there, a couple other black people. The one black kid I remember didn't know he was black yet. Because he was on she was like a cheerleader or something. He barely spoke to me. But the other people there were white, and they just sort of, my sister Judy took me in that first day, and she said my sister Joy. They called me Joy, and I used Joy because I've been written about a lot in the paper as Melba. And so my folks and I decided, okay, I don't want to go to this school and make this connection. I want the newspaper. Daddy, start. From the moment I got there, Daddy said no interviews. The newspaper could not interview me. I was not going to speak. He said, this is a time for you to learn what it is to be a normal teenager. You will do your homework. You will go to school. But it was very difficult because the school was all white, and I didn't, not that anybody ever did anything to me. I'll make that really clear. Everybody was very kind to me, but I expected them to do something to me. And that was hard in the beginning. But my sister Judy and my other sister Joni would just take me around and introduce me to their friends, my sister Joy, and they just put no juice on that. This is Joy. Yes, she's black, but they didn't even say that. I was waiting for them to say, why is she different?
Yes.
And they didn't.
And then you went on to college.
I started my college career at San Francisco State University, and I went to school there through through about the second or third year. And then I got married. And I got married to a white soldier because he was wearing the same green uniform that the soldiers wore who guarded me. Later a therapist would say, of course that's what you do. That's where your safety is rested. Because for my whole life, the thought that every day in your life for a year you get hit or you get threatened or you get sprayed with acid sets you up for always being frightened. To this day, I can be standing in a line waiting for theater outdoors or whatever, and I can hear a helicopter go overhead. It really frightens me, So my ex-husband would become also an island of safety. We were married for 7 years. By that marriage, I had a daughter named Kelly, and I was a housewife for about 5 of those years. And my mother would call up on Sunday and she would say, you know, my husband was from a fairly wealthy family up north. They had ranches, connecting ranches. And so he wasn't really concerned whether I completed college or not. But every Sunday came that call from my mother saying, excuse me, black folks go to college. Don't get comfortable. She was
when are
really
you starting back?
right, like give me the date,
Yes.
you know. And she was the echo of George McKay, my adopted father, who was saying, excuse me, I need that diploma. He said, I need that sheepskin before I die. I want some letters behind your name.
Right.
Can I see it? So they were like a mama, and I had two moms and this dad, all shouting the same chorus.
And they pushed you.
They pushed me. Now, my husband at the time and his family did not like that. They did not think women should work or go to college. And that was really a big disagreement between us.
I see.
I started back going to school. He really didn't like it at all. But it was important for me to do that. My mother was right, go to college. And so I did. I finished, I went back to school after my divorce. So then we didn't got divorced. I went back to school. And I was, in about 1971, going to San Francisco State when I had an opportunity to, number one, become an intern at a local television station, but most importantly, I was offered a scholarship to what is known as the Columbia Program, where they choose 32 black people out of the country to educate, black and other minorities, to educate in journalism, to infuse into the system. So I got this really huge prime opportunity, chosen, I had to compete and all that. And there was a teacher at San Francisco State College named, or San Francisco State University, they'll kill me for that.
Yes.
And start that sentence over again. There was a teacher at San Francisco State University named Lynn Ludlow, who would be another mentor. He would be another person in my life. I was just going to be a teacher, and he said, you don't want to do that. You write very well. Why don't you go to the Columbia program and become a news reporter?
Wow.
And that was sort of in the back of my mind, because I'd seen all those news reporters in Little Rock, Arkansas, who had made a difference. They're the reason I lived. If you shine a light, it's hard to hang somebody.
Yes.
So I went to Columbia University's program, got a master's degree there, and came out as a bona fide journalist, and began to work first on KQED here, which is our public television station, and then I went to NBC here.
I know that early on at some point you became very involved with a special agency that focuses on children with special needs for adoption. ASK, I believe it's called.
I was an NBC News reporter, and one day they gave me an assignment. And I had always bragged that I was, one day going to adopt, as I said. But one day, I would be in my late 20s when this happened. They gave me an assignment, and they said, go and interview Dorothy and Bob DeBolt. Particularly, they were interested in this woman, Dorothy DeBolt, who lived in the East Bay, because by this time, I think, she'd adopted some 13 children. And so one of the little girls that they had adopted had no arms or legs. And they were, at this point, bringing in children from overseas through the Vietnam situation. And I was there for the occasion of their adoption of a child named J.R. J.R. was both blind and spina bifida, paralyzed from the waist down. And so I remember as I left the studio, everybody said, oh, it's going to be so sad for you, isn't it? Patting me on the back. Well, chins up. So I get to the DeBolt household, and I meet Bob and Dorothy, and that would change my life. Again, a big event in my life, if you can think about the events. And I was not at all sad. It was like the happiest place I'd ever been. And it was, I began to see then that I was not doing enough paying back. I could hear my grandmother's voice, although she was long gone, saying, take a look. What can you do? And at this point, the DeBolts were just beginning their foray. They had worked many years. She'd worked many years. But they were just getting into the notion of setting up a public agency. And so, unknown at the time to the television station and the other friends that I worked with, I utilized the mail room to send out their flyers. I commandeered my friends who I worked with, and I coalesced them into helping the DeBolts, because when I came back from that first trip to their house, I was so stoked. I was inspired, because here these people were doing such an enormous deed for humanity.
Yes.
They had adopted all these children, handicapped or not,
Yes.
and they were changing lives. And that was the beginning of my understanding that one-on-one you can change a life by merely loving somebody,
Yes.
reading to them, walking with them, being with them. So this was a significant thing in my life, and I would become then attached to ask help to turn it into an agency, the first adoption agency in this state in I think 60 years.
Yes.
And I would work with them for 18 years of my life on the board, setting policy. Over that period of time, seeing to it that some 10,075 children got adopted. And so when I adopted my children, I take a hiatus off of all boards. But now I'm getting ready. I have asked the adults for permission to come back onto that board to contribute again. So that was, during those 18 years, I visited families, interviewed adoptees, went into orphanages, saw, what's going on in our country, which is that we have this whole layer of children who are being raised in foster homes that don't care, in a system that is quite latent with work. They need help.
Yes.
But also seeing that when you grow up in a group home, when you're 18, they kiss you goodbye, they give you a small check, 25, 30 bucks.
Wow.
And you go out in society. So people ought to stop asking themselves where gangs come from. They come from children and growing little teenagers and young adults who are unattached to anybody. And statistically, if you look statistically at all the people on death row today, some 60 to 70% are people who are not bonded. And I remember when I adopted my little boys, the judge and the psychologist said, if they cannot bond with you in a couple of years, we'll take them back. And I said, oh, they will. They'll bond. Because it is that bond you have with your mother
Yes.
and your father that keep you from going out and shooting somebody.
Yes.
It's that bond that you have with another human being that keeps you from robbing, stealing, whatever. And when I first adopted, a lot of people were against it, but I said, you know what? Here are two little boys who won't be in your kitchen 10 years from now with an AK-47, because they'll be in college. I know that.
Yes.
So all of these things in my life sort of cook like a stew. The one thing I think life is this. Life is like a large puzzle that you get handed piece by piece early on. And many of the pieces of puzzle don't have a shape. You don't understand. Many of the things that happened to me, I didn't understand why I couldn't make a marriage work. I didn't understand at the time where these devastating things happened to me. I lost a home, I did this, I did that. And I've, some of these mistakes I've repeated. But there is always a reason. And it's when you get the next piece of puzzle and it does fit. And as you get older, these pieces fit together in sections that you begin to see that each of your life is a building step to the next place.
Yes. Is there any particular advice that you would give to young girls now or young women who are just beginning in their lives about choices and the path that they might choose and how to accomplish, things as you have done in your life?
I think one of the most important things in life is to take stock. I really do think that old-fashioned, disciplined arena of it's Christmas, collect things and give them away. It's Easter, make new things and give them away. It's your birthday, what are your goals? I think one of the things and problems with young people is they believe that life goes on forever, and so few people stop to make goals in life. And then fewer people stop to look at what do you want to do, what turns you on, what makes you smile. And whatever that is, you have to look at it and do it. It turns me on to write, and that can be used in many different ways. I was an NBC News correspondent, I've written books, I write things, I like to write. It turns me on to talk, I'm a big gabber. I'm also nosy. And those things combined made me a great reporter. I'm very nosy. So you have to look at all your assets. It's really even important for someone as early as in their early teens to take a piece of paper and divide it in half and look at your assets. What are the things that you can do and that you can offer? And the other thing, again, is to remember that puzzle and remember that keep moving ahead. A honeybee flutters from flower to flower, assuming that it's on its own track. But what it's really doing is pollinating. What I'm saying is that sometimes you don't know what the next step is. There is this verse, man progresses by insight, not by sight. And so the important thing is to have a plan and keep moving ahead. And if you remain conscious, find some God somewhere would be my big last thing to tell everybody. If I was going off the edge of the earth, I'd say, find a God.
Yes.
I don't care what that God looks like. I don't care what you describe it as. But find some essence of good that you look to.
Your faith has been a staying power.
It is the only power that sustains you, is to realize that whatever's going on now, there is good. And whatever's going on now, you will be given the power and the strength to do what you need to do in life. Go for it. And remember that you're not alone. There is a God. There is good in the universe. If you want to call it God, just call it good. And so I would say, remember that connection and how important it is to connect somehow, to spend a moment of quiet time, whether reading the Bible or whatever each day of your life. Prayer is essential. Some sort of prayer is essential. So that would be the gift. The gift I leave to my children is prayer. We pray every single day, every morning, every night. And I tell them, God is as close to you as your skin. You need but to ask, and it will be revealed to you in all days and all times. So that is what I would say, is keep stock of yourself and keep connected to some sort of higher power. I don't care how you describe it.
Yes.